Hi, welcome to Rob's Strings and Things. Today I've got an interesting guitar for you. It's a Fender Telecaster. It's a beautiful butterscotch blonde Telecaster. I've had it since around about the mid-1980s. It's an interesting guitar because it was made in Japan, and there's a lot of interest in this story. And these guitars that were made in Japan in those 1980s are known as the JV series guitars, Japanese vintage guitars. How do they come to be made in Japan when Fender is obviously a very significant American music instrument company? Well, Leo Fender sold his company to CBS. It's said that CBS were having some problems with production quality and with some of the new models that they were producing. Meanwhile, demand was rising, and CBS recognized that actually some high-quality guitars are being produced in Japan, particularly by companies like Greco, and they were copies of the Telecaster and Stratocaster instruments. They were really good quality, and of course they were very much more cheap. They were much cheaper than the Fender instruments. So bearing in mind the problems that Fender was having then, they decided to send a team across to Japan to see if they could get some instruments made in Japan itself. They visited a few companies such as Greco and Fujigen, and they decided to have Fujigen make a few instruments for them to see what the quality was like. So in probably very early April 1982, Fujigen made some Strats and Teles, and the CBS company people came across to look at them. It's said that when they saw the quality of the instruments, they wept, because presumably at that time they weren't producing anything like the quality in the States. Okay, so they formed a partnership, and Fujigen started making 57 Strats and 52 Teles in their factory for sale in Europe and in Far Eastern Australia, but not for sale in the States, of course, because they would cost a lot less than the Fender guitars, and they would obviously undercut and that also compete probably in terms of quality. All this story is related on a really nice website all about these Japanese vintage Fender instruments called 21 Frets. It's a really great site, and there are a lot of instruments of that era actually registered, and this is one of the ones which is registered on that site. Anyway, interesting instrument, the 52 Tele, exactly as Leo Fender had it made. It has some interesting sounds on it, which I'll play in just a moment. It has all the original brass, the brass bridges here, the domed tone and volume knobs, and obviously this particular distinctive type of lever for the sounds. It has a scratch plate with the domed screws on it for those people who like to look at vintage, and everything is exactly as it is, all the wiring is exactly the same. And also an interesting thing about this instrument when it was first made, the 52 model, was that Leo Fender wanted this to be played in bands and orchestras where it could produce a really good bass sound. So as I'll show you in just a moment, this is produced, if you like, by introducing a relatively high capacitance capacitor into the circuit, particularly on the neck pickup, and this produces a very bassy kind of sound, very muted bassy sound. And of course it can't be altered by the tone knob here. It obviously has the bridge pickup, and clearly the middle position will get the tone variance on both the mixture of the neck and the bridge pickup. So there it is, and I'm going to play you some tones on it now. Very nice instrument. A lot of people don't like that tone, that low bassy tone on the neck pickup, and if they had original instruments they would have removed them, which is sad really, because some people really like that tone, and it's a very unusual feature. And of course once you've fiddled around with the electronics, it's no longer the original instrument anymore. But this has all the original instrument, and at the end of this I'll show you a few still photographs of the various components of this guitar. Anyway, it's a beautiful guitar, very lucky to have it. These JV series guitars, and this is JV 01124. The date of manufacture is shown if you remove the neck from these, and there's writing at the base of the neck, and this says 17th of April 1982. So it's one of the very earliest known 52 vintage Telecasters that Fujigen produced. So it's a very interesting and lovely instrument, and of course I love it. So I'm going to play you a few tones. I'm going to start off by playing the neck pickup, and you'll start to hear this sort of really bassy tone, just a few notes on it. There we are. I can switch it now into the mixed position where I'm playing both a combination of the two pickups. So this is, if you like, the rhythm setting, and just play this. It's more what you might really expect from a Telecaster, really. So that's the tone knob fully on, or you can just wind it down a bit, so you obviously mute the sound a bit. More, all the way down now, rolled all the way off. Now the bridge pickup, just roll the tone right up, so this is the classic sort of Telecaster sound. Okay, so there's the bridge position. You can roll that right off and have a listen to it. Okay, it is possible to get a kind of mixed sort of interesting sound here by actually trying to get this and keep this tone knob here halfway between the sort of the mid and the right position, and you get a kind of more quacky sound. I hope I can get it. In fact, people used to stick a matchstick in there to hold this in place. And that's sort of like, I don't know, sort of halfway between the two middle and right hand positions on the tone lever. And so I just play. But you need a matchstick really to get to work. Okay, so there it is, a beautiful Fender Telecaster series. It has the original Fender logo on the top, Squier series. When Telecasters, when Fender bought Squier, which is a string manufacturer in the States, they then used the Squier, or Squier, depending on how you want to pronounce it, as the, if you like, the series to be produced. And very few of these guitars were made with the actual full Fender logo here. It's often fraudulently copied on some of these guitars. And then, of course, this became Squier, or Squier guitars, which are now made all over the place, Indonesia, and of course also in Mexico as well. and of course very good guitars, but of course a more budgety guitar than the Fender originals. So this is a rare guitar, and it's described actually on the JV 21 frets site. Japanese vintage 52 butterscotch blonde guitar. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you liked this video, found it interesting. I know there are a lot of people who are kind of a bit nerdy about guitars, but this is a special guitar. It talks a lot about the history of Fender and instruments that they made. Thank you very much for watching.